Now, I think it's about time we looked at intuition. From psychological types, we're going to read the definition of intuition. From inturi, which means to look into or upon. Intuition is, according to my view, a basic psychological function. It is that psychological function which transmits perceptions in an unconscious way. Everything, whether outer or inner objects or their associations, can be the object of this perception. Intuition has this peculiar quality. It is neither sensation nor feeling nor intellectual conclusion, although it may appear in any of these forms. Through intuition, any one content is presented as a complete whole, without our being able to explain it or discover in what way this content has been arrived at, without our being able to explain or discover in what way this content has been arrived at. Intuition is a kind of instinctive apprehension, irrespective of the nature of its contents. Like sensation, it is an irrational perceptive function. Its contents, like those of sensation, have the character of being given in contrast to the derived or deduced character of feeling and thinking contents. Intuitive cognition, therefore, possesses an intrinsic character of certainty and conviction, which enabled Spinoza to uphold the scientia intuitiva as the highest form of cognition. Intuition has this quality in common with sensation, whose physical foundation is the ground and origin of its certitude. In the same way, the certainty of intuition depends upon a definite psychic matter of fact, of whose origin and state of readiness, however, the subject was quite unconscious. This is very interesting. This to me sounds very similar to fantasy. The fantasy talks about how contents from the unconscious appear suddenly in the conscious mind, and well, my wording of it was you have like an aha moment, or it's saying that intuition feels really certain, whereas fantasy has things popping into the consciousness but isn't necessarily accompanied by a feeling of certainty. Yeah, so it's almost like a perception is arrived upon either by way of an unconscious process or pertaining to objects within the subconscious. So it is different to fantasy in that way. So almost like processes going on in the background itself is not intuition, but the coming forward of contents or conclusions or perceptions from these unconscious processes with the accompanying feeling of certainty is what intuition is, and you can't really explain where it came from because the passing out has been done in the unconscious. Intuition appears either in a subjective or an objective form. The former, subjective, is a perception of unconscious psychic facts whose origin is essentially subjective. The latter is a perception of facts which depend upon subliminal perceptions of the object and upon the thoughts and feelings occasioned thereby. Okay, so that's extroverted intuition. You perceive an object, but not in the same way as sensation. It's almost like you read between the lines or you extrapolate. So intuition is like a reading between the lines, whereas sensation doesn't read between the lines, it just sees what it sees. And then introverted intuition, you're extrapolating information from subjective things. So I would say in a nutshell that intuition was the process of extrapolation, either in regards to external objects or internal ones. Concrete and abstract forms of intuition may be distinguished according to the degree of participation on the part of sensation. Concrete intuition carries perceptions which are concerned with the actuality of things, while abstract intuition transmits the perceptions of ideational associations. Concrete intuition is a reactive process since it follows directly from the given circumstances, whereas abstract intuition, like abstract sensation, necessitates a certain element of direction, an act of will or purpose. I'm going to come back to this idea of abstract and concrete after we've read sensation, because I was certainly under the impression that intuition maybe deals with the abstract and sensation deals with the concrete, but actually it's saying you can have both forms, concrete and abstract intuition, and concrete and abstract sensation. That is a very important concept. So you can be a sensor, but you could be primarily geared towards sensing in an abstract way, and perhaps that appears intuitive when it's not. And similarly, if you're using intuition in a concrete way, maybe that can sometimes appear as we understand sensation. So I'm going to bear that in mind. That'll be a really interesting topic to cover. In common with sensation, intuition is a characteristic of infantile and primitive psychology, as against the strength and sudden appearance of sense impression. It transmits the perception of mythological images, the precursors of ideas. Intuition maintains a compensatory function to sensation, and, like sensation, it is the maternal soil from which thinking and feeling are developed in the form of rational functions. Intuition is an irrational function, notwithstanding the fact that many intuitions may subsequently be split up into their component elements, whereby their origin and appearance can also be made to harmonize with the laws of reason. Okay, so even though it's irrational, intuition can be split up into its component elements and it can be made to harmonize with the laws of reason, so thinking and feeling. Everyone whose general attitude is orientated by the principle of intuition, i.e., perception by way of the unconscious, belongs to the intuitive type. According to the manner in which intuition is employed, either directed within in the service of cognition and inner perception, or without in the service of action and accomplishment, the introverted and extroverted intuitive types can be differentiated. Okay, so intuition can serve one's inner perception and one's inner cognition, or it can serve action or accomplishment. I think sometimes there's a perception of intuitive types not really achieving very much and they have their head in the clouds. But it's saying here that actually they could be a very doey person, and the intuition actually aids that instead of that stopping them from doing things. Every time I read this book, it just makes me feel really hopeful. In abnormal cases, a well-marked coalescence with and an equally great determination by the contents of the collective unconscious declares itself. This may give the intuitive type an extremely irrational and unintelligible appearance. Okay, so there's the stereotypical unhealthy intuitive type. Okay, so that's when a person aligns too much with the collective unconscious. And we'll read about what that is at some point too. But that's kind of its ideas that everybody has in their unconscious mind and then how strongly those ideas influence that person is dependent on the person. So we want to be wary of being too influenced by the collective unconscious. But when we do read into that definition, we'll find out what that is. I've got to write down what we need to look at. Okay, thank you. Just a short one today.